Yeah, let's give it a hand for Barry Cook. Barry started in a very similar place to you all, and we're going to hear a little bit about his story and some of the works that he's done as well, including Disney's Mulan, Walking with Dinosaurs, and even done some work with Crew, which is a global organization as well. So I'm excited to get a chance to interact with Barry a little bit today. We are going to have some people working on the sound to make sure that gets a little better, but in the meantime, I think we can go ahead and get started. Here's some water for you.
Oh, thank you.
It's a little dry here, especially when you're the main speaker. But,
I won't drink 2 bottles.
okay.
You can have the other.
Whew, good for me. So before we...
Here you go.
Yep.
So,
Thanks. Here, why don't you hold it? 'Cause
Okay. Sure.
you just need to hear me. They don't
All
need to
right.
hear me.
Hello?
There we go. Good. Guys, can you all hear him all right? Yeah, good. So before we get into your story of how you got to where you are, I just wanted to hear a couple of highlights too. What are some of the coolest things you've gotten to do and some of the fun people you've gotten to meet along the way?
Oh, well, this cartoon that I showed some clips from, Trail Mix-Up, was one of the 3 Roger Rabbit short cartoons that Amblin and Disney did together. And so my boss on this was Frank Marshall and Steven Spielberg. And so it was great working with them. And so I guess that was sort of a highlight. But it was also really fun to do because we were just told, just make it funny. And it had a big budget for a short cartoon. And we just had a blast at it. It was done all here in Florida. We did 2 of them here. Roller Coaster Rabbit, which Rob Minkoff, who later went on to direct Lion King with Roger Allers, okay. He directed that one, and I supervised the visual effects. And then I directed this one, and Trail Mix-Up. And that was really fun. I think, sort of highlight career as with someone like Spielberg and being invited to Amblin to show this. And they were shooting Jurassic Park at the time, and they were in their dailies, and so they invited me in right after they saw dailies. And I was very fortunate because Steven says, "Come sit next to me." And I was like, "This is great." And the whole time he was just like, "That's a funny gag," and he would elbow me in the ribs, And I'm like, "That's really funny. Did you storyboard that? I love that." So he loved it. And we had guys and we had some jokes that later got cut out. They were a little bit
pushing it too far.
Yeah, pushing it a little too far. But there, some of the guys were in tears, cracking up over that cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a work in progress we showed there. So we showed it when it was finished as well. But
yeah,
that was fun.
And that was a doorway for you to get into that the gig with Mulan, actually, right? So you directed this when you had been doing animations previously.
When I had directed an experimental film called Off His Rockers, that was it had a CG character and a hand-drawn character in the same environment, in a CG environment, and then there were some. In the end, there were some traditional sort of background paintings, but that cartoon was just something we did after hours, just some guys getting together saying we want to make a film, and we got permission from our studio managers to do that and to use the equipment, what little there was at the time. There wasn't very much. And so on the strength of that short film, that experimental film that I had done, then I got this gig doing the Trail Mix-Up.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And you also got to work with Michael Jackson, is that right?
On Captain EO, the film that showed at the amusement parks.
That's awesome.
And it was a 3D film, and it was old school 3D, and that's I hate to drop all the names in the first 2 minutes of the talk here, but George Lucas was executive producer of that film, and so he would come from time to time, and we would get to talk to him. At the time, he was dating Linda Ronstadt, and he would drive her little white Mercedes up to where we were working over in North Hollywood. But yeah, that was fun. We did a lot of green screen shooting with Michael Jackson on stage, and then we did stop motion piece of animation in the middle of that. That's in the middle of that film, transformation sequence. So.
That's great. Thank you so much. Now, your career has gone mostly through the medium of animation, though that wasn't what you originally went to school for, I guess.
I didn't go to school very long. This mic's really hot. gonna keep
This
it
one's
down here.
dead entirely, so.
Is it?
That's right. Maybe hold them in the middle.
Oh.
Do you want me to hold it over
No,
here?
it's okay. I'll just keep it.
All right. So what is it that drew you to animation, and what do you love about the film and animation medium as well?
Well, I loved cartoons when I was a kid, and I just loved watching cartoons. And when I was a kid, it was a long time ago, and with the color TV was just coming in. So when you saw your first Huckleberry Hound cartoon in color, your eyes just popped out of your head. You know, it was just like you couldn't believe what you were seeing. You know, I mean, nobody ever seen color on their TVs. You know, so I think I was just a cartoon junkie, Saturday morning cartoon junkie, and you have to realize too that, you know, they're even making commercials about it. But you didn't have any. You had cartoons to watch on Saturday mornings. That was it. You couldn't watch any other time in the week. Where would they be available?
On Netflix, right?
No, there are no home computers. So it was, you had no Saturday morning. So Saturday morning was like eating really sugary cereal and watching cartoons and getting like really excited about it. So, and then my dad is a fine artist, a painter, and so we were very fortunate. My brothers and sisters and I, we were very fortunate to grow up in a household where, and I'm sure some of you have and some of you haven't, but we were encouraged to be artistic, and we were encouraged to be artists, and we were encouraged to make our home movies, and we were encouraged to dress up in silly costumes, and it's like if we were odd because it's a small town in Tennessee near Nashville where I grew up, but so it was we were sort of the odd kids, you know, and it was okay if we grew our hair down to our shoulders, which we did, you know, and that kind of stuff. It was fine. My dad was like, you know, go for it. He wasn't a hippie, but he was a beatnik, actually. But,
that's a whole other story.
The earlier, before the hippies, there were the beatniks, you know, and they were like really cool with goatees, and they were painters.
We're coming back around to that, I think. So.
Yeah, sort of getting, it should be like a hipster almost today, I guess. It's sort of a hipster thing. Beatniks, yeah.
So you got your career start in the most traditional way, right? You like went through school and got discovered in school, and not at all, right?
No.
So how did that all come about? You started in Tennessee. Is there a lot of business in Tennessee for animation?
No. There's nothing. There's music. Lots of music there. Lots of great recording studios and great musicians there. But there really wasn't a lot of art or a lot of filmmaking or anything. But there was a very influential film festival called the Sinking Creek Film Festival in Nashville. It's now called the Nashville Film Festival. It's a big festival every year. But it was small, and it was at Vanderbilt University. And I was only like 13 years old, and I couldn't drive. But my dad would drop me off at the film festival. And I would just hang out all day with all these filmmakers. And I was like the kid, you know, like, who do you belong to? And I'm like, I'm just here to watch some movies, man. And I would get into the workshops with these older filmmakers and stuff, and we'd have a great time. And then, you know, when everyone else went to the bar, my dad would come and pick me up, and then I would go home, and he'd drop me off the next day. So, but that film festival was just eye-opening to me, you know, just storytelling and film. And then I got really into making movies at home. And again, I couldn't use my iPhone. We had to use a camera with film running through it, so, you know, Super 8. So if you've seen that J.J. Abrams movie, but that's sort of like what the vibe was when I was in junior high and high school, using Super 8 movie camera to tell stories and make movies and experiment with animation.
That's awesome. But then after that, you went to Hollywood?
I did. You know, I told my parents, I said, I'm going to go to Hollywood to make movies. And my parents, you know, most parents would say, are you insane? You can't do that. You don't have any, you know, money. And they didn't know, but they were just like, okay, and let us know when some of your stuff is on TV. You know? But they were like they were naive. They were more naive than I was, maybe. But they were just like, okay, sounds good. And my dad said, you know, son, he said, in a very southern drawl, you know, son, when I went off to college, my dad gave me $20. He said, so here's $40.
For inflation, right?
And I had saved about $1,700. I'd worked at a couple of odd jobs, you know, out of high school or during the summers. And so I bought a plane ticket, and I enrolled in a school called Columbia College, which is sort of like Full Sail. It's in Tarzana, California, and they teach film production. They don't teach recording arts, but they teach film production, television and film production. And had a lot of fun behind the camera as a kid, and so I really wanted to study cinematography. And so I went out to study cinematography, but then I soon ran out of money, and I soon had to drop out of school, and so a lot of good school didn't. But the nice thing about it was I worked on, for 2 years, all the students, I knew them all because we all lived in the same apartment building, a lot of students, and every student film that was being made at the school, I was helping on in some way, either loading magazines for the camera, loading film, or being the still photographer on set, or doing something, just gripping or something.
Is networking pretty important here too? I think it.
Yeah.
So, how many of you guys have been to Hollywood? Yeah, okay, a pretty good few of them.
How many of you have been to Hollywood in 1978?
Was it different then?
It was creepy.
Creepy?
Well, I mean, it was weird. It's weird now, but it was really weird.
Yeah, so you dropped out of school, and that wasn't necessarily seeming like a really good turn in your career path, and you're out here in Hollywood trying to find a job, trying to keep...
Almost got kicked out of my apartment twice, and the landlord was like, "You haven't paid your rent." And I said, "I can't afford it anymore." He said, "Well, let me move you." He was a nice guy. He said, "And let me move you to a cheaper apartment." So I went from an apartment that cost $160 a month to an apartment that cost $85 a month. You can imagine it wasn't like the Ritz or anything.
Still typical prices in LA, yeah.
It was clean. It was okay. I guess, but
how did you pay the bills then?
So I finally got a job at a place called New World. The New World. It was a head shop.
What's that?
You know anybody know what a head shop is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
No,
it's a place that sold drug paraphernalia. And they were legal in California. Then they became illegal at the time, but they were legal in California. And so all of my, all the people that I would meet from the day-to-day basis, they were either prostitutes, drug dealers, or porn actresses, or just your regular slice of life in Hollywood sort of people, and bikers, a lot of bikers, Hell's Angels. That's where I got my first pair of Ray-Bans like this from Hell's Angel, and it was, he left them in the store, and 30 guys came up on motorcycles, and one of the guys left his Ray-Bans just like these on the counter. And I'm like, I'll just keep these in case he comes back. I'll give these to him. And a few years later, I had a motorcycle of my own, and they were in my pocket, and they fell out and smashed on the road. But I still like them. So I've always worn those ever since then. I like those.
Bikers can't hold on to those Ray-Bans, huh?
They can't.
So you had a couple of seeming career opportunities, but they didn't turn out well, right? You were telling me before, some people that took you down some red herring trails.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we want to get into some of that, yeah. I don't know. When I was in Hollywood, next to my apartment, a guy came in, and he was an actor. He had done some. He had a speaking part in a couple of movies. There's one called Roller Coaster or something back in the 70s that he did, and I won't mention his name or anything, but he started this acting studio. Just on the corner. It was just a block. I lived a block north of Hollywood Boulevard and a block west of Vine Street. So almost, it's at Hollywood and Vine, right there where the Capitol Records building is. And I lived just on that little hill up there on Ivar Street. And so next to Green's Soul Food, which is the best soul food in Hollywood, at least the best I ever had.
I was writing that down. Greens.
Yeah, I loved eating there, but this guy opened up a studio for actors, and I had done some acting in high school, and I like to do stupid stuff and goofy stuff, and so I thought, well, it's right next door to my apartment, and he was like, oh, come on in, and it wasn't like he was looking for a lot of money to take the acting classes, but what I found out later, it was a front for male prostitution. and he was trying to entice me into this job. So that didn't go over too good. I sort of backed away out of that career. I'm glad I didn't go down that path. But then I had other so-called friends, and one of them tried to convince me to become a cocaine dealer. Now back then, cocaine was very expensive. I mean, now you can buy crack anywhere cheap. But
Not that we know.
But back then, a vial of cocaine, like 1 gram, that was like, it was cut. The stuff that I would sell at the head shop, it was almost cut in half with this other powder, this just like, I don't know what, a baking soda practically. I don't know what it was. But a vial of that would be like $100. And for a guy whose apartment rent was only $85, that was very expensive.
Yeah.
And I really am very thankful. I thank the Lord really that it was expensive, because if I'd had access to crack, then I probably would have been a crackhead and I'd probably be dead in months. I really seriously believe I probably would have been in the gutter.
Yeah.
So it was like, I'd get a taste of this drug every once in a while, but it was so few and far between that I could never possibly afford to get addicted. So that was really a good thing.
Being poor at the time was good.
It was very good. So yeah. Count
So
your
strategy
blessings.
tip number 1, be poor. You guys got that? Thank you.
Sometimes being poor can save your life.
I think we've all got that covered in this room, so we're all right with that. But no, I'm glad you go into that, because I think it's important for people to see the dangers and the snares that are out there, because there's lots of people who want to take advantage of you, who put a front of one thing forward when really what they want is,
Absolutely.
even if it's not as bad as like dealing drugs and prostitution and all that stuff, there's plenty of people who are really in it for themselves and looking to, here, I'll give you a class on how to do this, and really, they just want your money for a quick.
You really have to be careful, and especially in big cities, and I was like a country bumpkin. Really, I was straight out of the sticks of Tennessee, it was like, and walking, down Hollywood Boulevard, staying alive. It's like, whoa. And it's mind-blowing. It couldn't have been more of a shock if they had shot me to Mars. There was that big of a difference in the world I was living in, and it was really hard to negotiate, to navigate those first few years.
Yeah. So a country bumpkin who had to drop out of school, shrink his apartment, work at a head shop, getting proposition and stuff. Doesn't sound like you were on the right track, or like that. It didn't sound like hope is very good for you. But obviously, we know that things are going well for you now. So, what would you say were some of your turning points?
Well, when I got my first job in the industry, it was I think a big turning point, because then I had enough money, and I told the guy at the head shop, I said, I just got hired at Hanna-Barbera Studios to be an assistant animator. And Hanna-Barbera doesn't exist anymore, but they used to do the Jetsons and the Flintstones and Smurfs and things like that.
I remember the Hunt.
Yeah, and I got my first job on the assembly line doing this stuff. And he's like, what? He says, you can't quit. And so I was making, when I got that job, I was bringing home about $85 a week. So, a quarter of my pay would go to my rent. And I said, I'm going to be making 3 times. I'm going to be making $240 a week. And I said, I can't stay here and work. He says, but it's almost Christmas. He says, don't you know how many bongs, people want to buy these and things? It's like, it's almost, you can't walk out on me 2 weeks before Christmas, man. And I said, sorry, I got to go. And this guy was funny, because he looked like Clint Eastwood with red hair. And he was a big bodybuilding guy. And he was sort of serious like that. And he didn't do any drugs. He was like a juicer guy, like way before his time. And
Like carrot juice, you mean?
yeah, but he was, but he made a living selling drug paraphernalia.
A stand-up guy like that, you think he would have understood. But how did you score a job with Hanna-Barbera? That sounds like.
Well, it took 2 tries. Hanna-Barbera. I started working there in 1979. I went there in 1978, as I recall, and I don't remember certain details for a lot of reasons. But I went. It was basically an open. I don't know how I heard about it, just through the grapevine, maybe through even school. They said they have a training program at Hanna-Barbera, and it's they're looking for art students and people who can draw, and who can draw well. And you can make an appointment and show your portfolio, And if they like your work, they'll invite you to a class, and this was very legit. And you don't have to pay anything for the class. It's on them. It's at their studio. It's twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday nights, and they'll teach you how to do in-betweening for 2 years. Well, we only had 2D animation then, but it was in-betweening for Saturday morning cartoons. And being the cartoon junkie I was when I was a kid, I was like, this would be great. And I went over there and I had a sketch. I had a portfolio. I don't know if you could call it that, but had some cartoon drawings and had some really detailed pencil renderings that I had done from photographs from movies and things, like 2001, the two guys talking with Hal in the background, just a black and white pencil rendering of that, and David Bowie with the Native American lady, trading beads, and The Man Who Fell to Earth, and I was into, movies at the time, and I would just like to draw, just get those still a picture for like a lobby card or something and copy that, or from a magazine and copy that. And he's like, well, these renderings are good, but your cartoons really aren't very good. He says, come back when you have more work. And I was so depressed, I was so down, and I'm just like, oh, I'm just not, it's never going to work for me. And I didn't, but I did, over the next year, I did do a few more drawings. I didn't do that many more, but I went again, about a year later, maybe it was only 9 or 10 months later, but I went again, and I was very, very fortunate because there was a guy in the lobby with me, a guy named Stan Wallace, and he was my age, and Stan had his portfolio, and he's all ready, and I had my drawings, and I'm ready, and some secretary person or assistant said to us, Harry's got to leave for lunch in just 5 minutes. Harry was the guy who was interviewing us and looking at our work, and so you guys can both go in together.
So you tripped Stan, and then what?
Stan and I both walked in there, and he's, all right, guys, lay out your drawings. Okay. Fine, come to class Tuesday. He was in a hurry. It was good that he was in a hurry. He didn't look at anything. He only looked at a few
That's something to
drawings,
write down,
and
everybody.
he's like, you're in. So we're into the class. It doesn't mean you got a job yet. But then within 3 months, I had a job, and I'm still doing this stuff. But,
Yeah, very cool. So what took you from Hanna-Barbera to like Disney, and what got you in? What were some of your first works there? You worked on the Smurfs, right? Is that
the first pilot episode of the Smurfs? Yeah, it was only 15 minutes, but they were selling it to the network, to see if they would like it. And so yeah, it was the first pilot, and I was just doing, in betweening stuff on that, assistant animation.
Gargamel was your idea and stuff?
No, none of it was my idea at all. But I did meet Peyo, who was the inventor of the Smurfs. He came over and from, I guess, Belgium, or I don't know where they're from. And his writer was a guy with a really long beard, a skinny guy, I think the big eyes, and he was like, he was sort of like that guy from Rocky Horror Picture Show, the bald guy in Rocky Horror.
Yeah.
So with a long beard, imagine.
I can already picture it will haunt my dreams.
Yeah, it was great. He was a great guy. But he'd hardly say anything, but he wrote all the comics, and Peyo drew all the comics. And Peyo gave me a drawing of the Smurf, and I've got it somewhere. I don't know where it is.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did that lead into Disney then?
It was funny because there was a movie being made called Heavy Metal. Oh, remember that? Heavy Metal was like music videos.
Sells really well at the head shop too.
Oh, there's a movie, but by this time a few things had changed in my life, and I was pretty satisfied in Hanna-Barbera, and I'd gotten married by this time too, and I'm still married to the same person. Amazing. It'll be 36 years this December. But anyway, they said, and they're recruiting it, and they want, they had a studio in Toronto doing some stuff, and around the world. But they were doing a few sequences in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine, Mike Lessa, and he and I were really good friends at Hanna-Barbera, and we were also rivals to see who could create the largest quantity of work, because we would get a bonus for the number of drawings or the footage we would do. So everything was counted in film feed. So you had a quota that you had to finish each week, but if you went over the quota, then you got like an extra $15 for every foot you did or something. So it was an incentive program. So we were always in competition, to see how fast we could do it and make some extra money. But we were really good friends. And so Mike left Hanna-Barbera to go work on heavy metal. And after heavy metal, Mike called me and said, they're doing a movie at Disney. And he said, I don't know what it is. He said, it's some science fiction thing. He said, it's called Tron. And he said, they wanted me to work on it, but I can't work on it because I just signed a deal with, of course, we didn't know him. He says, do you want to work on it? And I said, well, to get into Disney, maybe. I said, so what's the deal? And he said, you got to talk to this guy, call this guy. And he said, it's 6 months work. And he said, they need some help doing effects, visual effects stuff. And that was all by hand and camera, and the way we did it back then was crazy. But so I went and I was an assistant animator on Tron, and then I became an animator on Tron, and I was an effects animator on Tron. And did a lot of work on that movie for about 9 or 10 months. And then Don Hahn, you may know his name if you know Disney, and he produced The Lion King, but he also did Maleficent last year. He produced that movie, and but he saw my work, and he said, because the Tron group were just a bunch of guys from the commercials world and different places around, art. They didn't call them boutiques then, but like boutique little studios and people who would do advertising and stuff. And they came in to do this movie. It really wasn't. Disney was co-producing the film, but it really wasn't the Disney artists weren't working on it. It was a group of us, and we were all like motorcycle riding, sort of. And the Disney people at the time were pretty buttoned up, actually. It was sort of like an old Ivy League campus at the time. But so we would come in, on our bikes. They were like, "I'll be glad when these guys leave." And we all had like long hair. And,
the punks at Disney.
We were like the punks at Disney. But so I came to Disney to work for 6 months, and I stayed for 22 years. So.
Wow, that's great. What are some of the other films you've worked on? And
when we talked about doing visual effects, I worked on Tron. I worked on Michael Jackson's Captain EO film, and then I did a few things. Later have like Disney Sunday night movies and stuff that were produced for TV. So I'd sometimes do like, in this scene, a lightning bolt needs to strike the old town church. Can you do that for us? Okay. So I'd go off and figure that shot out or whatever and do that. So I did a lot of odd things, and I sort of became known as an artist who knew the camera department very well and knew how animation could be photographed in different ways. And I was pretty inventive at the time of doing things, and a lot of it I picked up during Tron from these guys who had come in from the commercial world and from ILM, because John Van Vliet had just finished doing visual effects on Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original, and he was my supervisor on Tron. And so I learned a lot from him. Mm-hmm. So I had sort of some skill sets that the Disney effects animators didn't have.
Nice.
And so I was learning from them, and then they could learn from me what I picked up too. So I sort of became like, sort of a guy that was a specialist or something.
Mm-hmm. But I IMDb'd you, and I saw some other pretty big titles in there too. Little Mermaid, I think.
The Little Mermaid. I didn't draw every bubble in The Little Mermaid, but I did draw probably about 30 million of them. So, bubbles, stuff like that, water effects and lightning, and an effects animator's job then, it still is really, but just dealing with anything that's not a character. Sometimes you may have a character like Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast, which I worked on, his flames on his body. So you do the flames on his body, or you do, if somebody's riding in a cart or something, you might do the cart, or you might do some, vehicle or, stuff like that. So it was fun. It was all fun stuff. And I also worked on The Black Cauldron, which was a terrible movie,
but the great book. I wish it was a good movie.
Well,
anyway,
they can't all be great.
But you moved from special effects animation, drawing bubbles, to now calling the shots. Now
to Florida.
Yeah.
Moved to Florida. That was a big move because Disney wanted to open an animation studio here, and they wanted a few brave volunteers to sort of lead the way and come down here and establish a studio. And we had a great studio here for 15 years. It's a shame that it closed in 2004, but and there were 3 features produced here. Mulan was the first feature, and Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear. So those 3 features were done here in Florida. Mm-hmm. Almost, not completely. Mulan had a lot of LA connections, and of course Chris Sanders was our head of story on the film, and then he went on to direct, on Stitch, which was his idea. He's at DreamWorks now. I think he just did. I think Home is his movie. That I don't know. I think it's come out. It just came out. Home. Yeah. I think that's Chris's movie. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But what?
He's a genius.
I mean, how did you get seen from just a guy drawing to? I think we could give this guy a major feature film.
Well, I don't know what people are thinking, but it was just they came to me and they said, look, because the Florida studio had done about 20 minutes of Lion King here, and about 30 minutes of Beauty and the Beast, and about 30 minutes of Aladdin we had done here, just almost as a B unit, not really a B unit, because we were getting A scenes. I mean, we were, Aaron Blaise was animating the Beast, and Mark Hind was animating Belle in Beauty and the Beast, and so we did a lot of high-end character stuff for those films, and effects work. We were a full studio. We weren't just doing part of it. We would complete scenes from animation to finish shots, for the movie. We called in animation back then they called every shot a scene, and then every scene a sequence.
Okay.
But like the big chapters in the DVD would be sequences. Yeah, so they said, so we were all saying, we're ready to do a feature, So every time we'd see the bosses, the California bosses would come and visit, and
chasing them around.
and we'd be like, we can do a feature film here, we can do a feature. So one time the vice president of feature animation said, come to lunch with me. So I went to lunch with him, and he said, look, he says, we want you to develop a feature, and to be Florida's first feature. So I was the first artist asked to work on this film called Mulan. We called it The Legend of Mulan at the time. But it was there was no really real source material. There was one book that they had bought the rights to. It was by a writer named Robert Sanssouci, who had written a children's book about Mulan. The movie doesn't bear much. Sanssouci, huh?
Art of War?
No. This is The Art of War.
Sun Tzu.
Yeah, no. This is a children's book about Mulan. But we
Art of War Junior.
We studied The Art of War for Mulan. Actually, we studied that book. But so I was like the first artist to ask to develop it, and I just sort of went to my little desk and just started drawing and thinking about things. They said, oh, if you want one of the other guys, who do you want? And I said, oh, Rick, I'd like Rick Sluter, and he became the art director for Mulan. And we started developing stuff, Sean Sullivan, some other people. And then really, we didn't have the development chops in Florida. We had the production chops. We knew what we were doing when it came to production, but developing a story from nothing almost, and doing storyboards and story reels, we needed some heavier hitters. So Chris Sanders came aboard as the head of storyboarding, and they called the head of story. And Dean Dubois, who just finished directing How to Train Your Dragon 2, he was sort of one of our second story artists. Chenyi Chang, who's an amazing character designer and just artist in general. But the Florida studio was a lot of, people hired right out of school, the best schools, Ringling, and for art, Ringling and Cal Arts and a few others. So we began developing it, but eventually I had to go to California for a couple of years. And there we picked up sort of more talent, convinced them to come to Florida with us, and got the story reels going in a good shape. And then we started production down here.
Yeah.
And we finished the film here.
Do you have a clip for that?
I do have a little clip. Maybe you've seen it before. Let me see if I can find it.
In the meantime, why don't we take just like 2 or 3 questions about what you've heard so far, or anything that you haven't heard that you'd like to hear, and we'll hear this clip, and then I'd like to get a little more personal with them too. Who's got a question now? In the back there? Go ahead.
When you brought in the cultural aspects of Mulan into the story, how much of the local people of where like the setting was, out in the culture, did you talk to them a lot?
We did, and we went to China for a period of time, and spent time there. One of the funny things was in China, we go to these little villages, and we'd say, tell us what you know about Mulan. And they would all say, well, she's from here. You know? So she can't be from every place. But also, too, we wanted to cast a lot of the Asian community of actors in LA. And we didn't stick strictly with people from China, because we had Japanese and others, too. But we wanted to, try to get some of that feel to it. And Ming-Na Wen was my idea for a voice. And I had to fight for her a lot, because they're like, she's not well known enough. And I'm like, but she's great. And I'm not sure if she's right. I said, but she's great. And now she's on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and she's great.
Yeah.
I love her. I went to her wedding reception. It was at a bowling alley.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, she's not married anymore.
Got another question here.
Oh, go ahead.
Sort of a follow-up on the last one. Since you so heavy for Netflix, who exactly stood up as equally for Eddie Murphy?
Eddie Murphy was, well, it was like, Disney had all these sidekicks, and it was like
Can you hear him, by the way?
like a Billy, it's like, do you want to do sort of, a Billy Crystal type or whatever? It's like, well, I don't know, maybe, somebody like, and it's like, it was a weird choice. I think it was a weird choice to do Eddie Murphy, but it was fun. He was great, and he was, we recorded always at his house near New York City. And, except one time in Miami, where the fire alarm kept going off. That was another story. I'll show you just some. I just put together these little clips that were just some highlights from the movie. Oh, that was bad. It was so much fun. We had so much fun making that movie. It was just insane fun. 98 Degrees was Stevie Wonder. I don't know where 98 Degrees is, but Stevie Wonder was really cool. And that recording session was amazing. To watch that man singing is unreal.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Now, from there, there were a couple more films that were done in Orlando, but then they changed the animation style, and you eventually moved on from Disney. Would you give us a minute on what that was like and what happened since then?
Well, there's a big article written about some of that, but it was, I don't know exactly what was going on within the company, but they wanted to, well, they knew everything was shifting to CG, which was fine with us. We love CG. We were using it in all the films. We didn't mind going. I was developing one film called My Peoples that never got made, and it was sort of a hybrid. It had some 2D and CG characters together, but there were two very different kinds of characters in the story, so sort of justified using two different mediums. They closed the studio here in 2004. So the studio here ran for 15 years, from the day it opened to the day it closed, about 15 years. And it was a great studio. It was an amazing studio.
And then from then, you went independent?
From then, I've just been sort of independent contractor, and I've just worked on various movies here and there, and helping people with scripts and things like that.
And you've helped with Full Sail as well, is that so?
Yeah, I was actually at Full Sail a couple of years after Disney closed, and I can say I taught here, but I didn't really very well. But I helped them develop the animation pre-production class for the bachelor's degree program. Mm-hmm. So I helped sort of design the syllabus for that, and sort of left that behind. I'm sure it's changed radically since then, but so yeah, it was my time at Full Sail. So I became acquainted with the campus, and I've been on the advisory board at Full Sail. I was last November, I think. Mm-hmm. I think it was November. And then I couldn't make this last one, but maybe the next one I might do. I don't know. So I sometimes I do stuff with them.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I'd like to get a little more personal too, about your faith journey too, because as I understand it, you kind of grew up in a church setting, and then kind of walked away from that, but then you found God in Hollywood. Which
he found me. I didn't find him. Believe me, I was not looking.
Isn't typically what you would think, but I have a quote here from you. It says, "Before I got my first job in the industry, my life was spiraling downhill fast. The story involves a cocaine dealer, 2 motorcycles, a stolen car, a femme fatale whose father threatened to kill me, and an abandoned New Testament."
Script, right? Yeah,
right. And you should, and some of the images too, like
Well, what can you say? It was a crazy time in my life, but you know, it's just like any kid is like. My parents brought me up in the church, and it was sort of conservative and everything, and I just rebelled, you know, we just sort of rebelled. And my dad did have this artistic side, but, you know, sort of religiously speaking, he was, you know, pretty conservative in my family and everything. It's just the, you know, just the culture and the community. So, you know, the quicker I could get away from that, the better, you know, I thought. You know, I didn't really want any part of it. I didn't really understand maybe, you know, I didn't understand much at all, but so yeah, I just sort of ran away from it, and I just didn't want to have anything to do with that, really. You know, it's like, it's cramping my style, you know? I didn't want to be a Bible thumper or anything like that. That was really terrible. But through a lot of hard times, and some of the stories are really funny, actually, but a lot of hard times, and through, yes, some, you know, a so-called friend of mine who I knew, and he was like, dude, somebody stole my car. And I'm like, okay. And he says, but my brother saw it on his way to work, and could you help me steal it back?
A good idea, everybody.
So
by
we were
the way.
in South Central LA, and I'm this little white kid, scrawny kid at the time. And at midnight, I'm taking a car out of somebody's garage. I mean, somebody's driveway, and it's a nice Camaro. This guy had money. He happened to be Chinese, and his family had lots of money, and he was doing lots of drugs. And he had a lot of drugs in the car, and I think that's why he didn't want to report it to the cops or something. He had some excuse, I don't know. But we went and stole. I got the car back that night, and I'm, you know, flying up the 101 freeway back to Hollywood, you know, about 80 miles an hour, and I'm looking behind, and there's a car behind me the whole way, and I'm like, I'm being followed, you know. We didn't have cell phones then. But when we got back up to Hollywood, I didn't go to my apartment. I went, you know, about a block south, just by Hollywood Boulevard, and I said, Ed, I think somebody was following me the whole time. I said, I don't want to park this in front of my apartment. He said, okay, no problem. My brother will drop me off in the morning and get it. And they put like house paint. Somebody had followed us, and they poured house paint, and they painted the whole inside of the car with house paint. Brand new car. And it was just like,
like you do, right? I mean, that's
like you would, just to say, dude, we stole your car and you stole it back, and we'll teach you. We're going to ruin it for you. So I don't know. It was bad, but it was just things like that I was like, I was not hanging out with the right people in any shape or form. You know, I was really walking in a lot of dangerous waters and a lot of very tempting waters. You know, I mentioned the drugs and things like that, but really. I was, you know, on the verge, you know, and then I was dating a woman who was probably 10 years older than I was, and but she still lived with her parents, who were like in her 30s or something. But they had a big mansion down in Hollywood. It was like this big, like the Beverly Hillbillies. It was like the Beverly Hillbillies place, and we thought we were there alone one night, and her parents were out in Palm Springs, but no, her dad came home, and. Anyway, and he's threatened to kill me, and we got into a fight, and I just threw my jeans on. Before that, I was all natural. Threw my jeans on, and I tried to get out of there, and they said, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. When other expletives that I can't say at full self.
hitting you,
No,
it's
I
not
can't
right.
say it in the lecture, but yeah, he started punching me, but fortunately the guy had a really lousy punch. It really soft. You know, it was like a really soft punch. And it was like, but he almost knocked me over the top of the Beverly Hillbillies railing. You know, the big stairs that come down, you know, that big thing? And I almost went right, I was like, whoa! And I hung on, and I got out of the front of the house, I'm going to kill you! You know, and I heard sort of like, you know, I felt, So I'm sort of walking back to my apartment like, you know, I almost got myself killed tonight. This is not good. And I guess I started praying a little bit, you know. It was just like, I don't want to die here.
Yeah.
I don't want to die without my shoes. It's just like, I don't want to, I'm only like 19 years old. It's like, I don't want to die. I don't want to Lord, I don't want to die. I don't want this guy to kill me. And I'm walking home thinking every car that came up was going to be him, you know. And part of it was maybe just a wild imagination, you know, I don't know. But I thought, you know, this guy's going to come up and run over me or shoot me or something. Because he said he was getting his gun right as I left the house. And so I just, you know, I didn't know. But I think it put a sort of a scare into me.
Just a wake-up
So
call.
but it was a bit of a wake-up call, yeah. But before that, I was hanging out with this other guy who was a so-called record producer. And this guy was also, he was an older guy, but I found out that he liked younger men. And I found out a little late on this thing, but the thing about it was, but I was
Too late,
and I
Alan.
wasn't eating well. You know, it's like I didn't have any much money at the time. This was, you know, even before the head shop days. But I was walking. We were walking down Hollywood Boulevard one day, or maybe Sunset Boulevard, and he's walking, and I'm like sick. You know, it's like I'm just sick, and my stomach was hurting, and I was like, I said, I don't remember the guy's name. I said, I got to get back to the apartment. I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I said, I'm sick. I got some of my stomach virus. But I was all crunched over. And on the street, on the sidewalk, was this Bible, one of these little New Testaments that the Gideons hand out. And I would have never seen it had I been walking like this.
As you
I was
usually
like this, as usual. My usual self. I was like this. And so it's like, okay. So I think things like that happen for reasons. I'm one of those guys that think it's like everything sort of works for a reason. But I took it home, but I didn't read it or anything. I just thought, hey, I found something. I got something for free today. This is a good day. And I put it on my shelf. I didn't look at it probably for a couple of years. But when I got to Hanna-Barbera, I met a guy there named Peter. And Peter was an artist who had also come in through that training program. And Pete was a Christian. And he had a good friend. And they had shared an apartment together, and Pete was just a good friend to me. You know, he didn't care that I didn't love God. He didn't care. He still loved me. Pete did. He wanted to hang out with me. We did music together. We did lots of things. And he didn't say, oh, you know, I'm a Christian and you're not a Christian. I don't want to hang out with you. But for me, it's like he was just a great guy, and this friend of his was a great guy. We did a lot of music together and played around stuff. And we worked at the studio together. He eventually worked at Disney too, also with me. And those guys were just very influential and very encouraging to me at a time when I needed it.
Yeah, I feel like there's a difference between like the false friends and the true friends. It sounds like there's so many people out there taking advantage.
Yes, I had, you know, it was strange, but yeah, but after that encounter and the wake up call from the girlfriend, the woman friend whose dad wanted to kill me, you know, it's like I just started reading the scriptures, and I just got this strange feeling overcame me. It's like, well, this could be true. And I said, you know what? I think it probably is true. And it sort of just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, wow, what if this is true? Well, that would change everything, wouldn't it? You know. So that was sort of my approach to it. And then I don't know. One night it was just one of those things where I just sort of felt very convicted of like the lifestyle I had led. Not so much. It was just my directionlessness, and no real foundation to my life or what I purpose,
Mm-hmm.
And even though I had a studio job by that time, there was there's a lot of emptiness and stuff. But yeah, so that's sort of the way my life sort of turned around in a.
And it's even kind of a scenic moment, right, over on the...
Well, yeah, I got on my motorcycle and I said, I just really need to repent of, I've just been like a rotten person. And I can't, I was saying there's a lot of bad friends, but I was doing a lot of bad things too, because I had, I had a few girlfriends here and there, and I was sort of not very kind. I not that I was a bad guy, but I just didn't respect people like I should have respected them, and especially women. I didn't respect them the way I should respect them, and young ladies, and so I just felt a burden of just sort of shame and guilt, that I felt like I got to get this off of my shoulders. This is terrible, So I got on my motorcycle, and it was funny because it's like this repent story, It's like, you can tell by now that I sort of see everything as a bit of a movie or a bit of a, some sort of scene out of a movie.
I think a few of us can relate.
Including
to that.
my own life, yeah, you do. But I got on my motorcycle and I went up to Griffith Observatory, and if you know Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, it's like the big place, and James Dean's movie Rebel Without a Cause, there's part of it was shot there. Yeah, and the city's down below Los Angeles, and you can see all the way to Los Angeles. Back then it was very smoggy, much more than it is today, but I just went up there and I just got on my knees and I prayed and I just said, Lord, I think I'm screwing up my life really bad, and so if you would help me sort of straighten that out, and sort of just repented, and it was, the funny thing was, it was hilarious actually, and I think this shows that God has a great sense of humor, but I was on my knees. It's a public place, where they have the things you look through. You put you look through to see the city view, and I'm on my knees. And inside the planetarium, they're having a big show, and they're playing, I don't know, Flight of the Valkyries, or some kind of music was coming from inside. And the more I prayed, and I was weeping, it's like one of those typical repentant sort of guys, and the music was swelling in the background, and I just started laughing. It was just hilarious, But I really felt a great burden lifted off of me that day, and yeah, I mean, trying to every day live as a Christian is very tough for me. It's like I'm a pretty rotten Christian, I think. As I go, I'm not a great one, but I think it's been wonderful. It's a short time after I met my wife, who happened to be a sister of one of my good Christian friends that I met.
Okay.
The good Christian friends that I had met, and she came to town, and the rest was like romance.
Well, that's awesome. And it was even, you said something about like it was a church group film project that kind of got you seen as a director, that got you that short.
We did, yeah. So I had some other Christian friends at Disney, and we made a short film called The Tempter's Voice, and we shot it on 16 millimeter, and we were mostly guys from the effects department. It's funny, a lot of directors come out of the effects department. Gary Trousdale came out of the effects department, myself, and a couple others, but it was Jesus being tempted in the wilderness. And it was a serious, sort of straight up film. Mm-hmm. And a guy named Dan Bell was in it, who also played Smiley in the first Darkman. He played Jesus in it.
Kind of a different role, but
Yeah, I don't know if he really went on to do much more acting.
So you guys were doing this just in your spare time, kind of a little club?
Just, out of our pocket. I'm doing another film right now. It's out of my own pocket, a short film, but it's a dark, sort of surreal comedy. Mm-hmm. It's not biblical in any stretch of the imagination.
But they kind of saw you working on that?
Well, I don't know. It was just like, I don't know. It's like, this guy's a filmmaker. This guy wants to be a filmmaker. This guy loves making film. So I just think, I think that was noticed, yeah.
And that's when they were kind of like, here, try this Roger Rabbit film.
Well, no, because I was still in Los Angeles then.
Oh, okay.
It was before we moved to Florida.
Still,
yeah.
neat.
Yeah, we shot it out at Vasquez Rocks.
Okay.
You see these rocks, the rocks that jet out of the side of the...
Yeah.
They've been in Star Trek, so it's another thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's filled in for a planet.
Cool. Well, we're going to play another film in just a minute. We're going to switch computers so we can show that. But while we're doing that, do we have any other questions for just what you've heard so far? After that, I want to show you one of his more recent projects, but go ahead.
How does, creatively, when you do your work, how has God affected that in your life? Like, has He given you a new inspiration to create creatively?
Well, I guess for me, the thing that the way I see it is, if you take, in the Bible, the first line in the Bible is, "In the beginning, God created." So that's sort of like, He was a creator. He was creative, and and it's like, however He did it, who knows, mysterious. But that's an attribute of who Christians believe God is. He's a creative being. Mm-hmm. And if we're in His image, then we're obviously creative beings too, aren't we? And so I just but I think the biggest influence of my work is just like do the best work you can do, because why waste your time doing sort of, you know, lesser work or trying, you know, I mean, not that I haven't made some bad films, but try to do the best, you know, work you can, and that's, you know, sometimes I think a good way, you know, people recognize that professionally. If you're doing the best work you can, then people in the industry or people you're working for will understand that and want you to do more of that good work because they need it.
One more question?
So what advice for a student who wants to become an animator? What would be your core advice?
Don't go the way I did, because it can be very hair-raising at times. But somebody who wants to be an animator, or wants to be a director, or wants to be a writer, or wants to be an actor, or any of those creative sort of, or a designer, or video game, you know, whatever it is. First of all, and maybe you've heard some people say this before, but I think it's very true. If you want to be an animator, animate, and you are an animator. Never wait for somebody to give you permission to be a director. Never wait for somebody to give you permission to be a filmmaker, or to be a singer, or to be whatever you want to be. Just do it. Just do it. I mean, like the Nike thing, I guess, but I don't mean it like that. But it's like, if you make a film, you're a filmmaker. Maybe a lousy film. Your first film may not be good, but you're a filmmaker. And it's like, you are a filmmaker. You don't have somebody pay you thousands of dollars to validate that you're a filmmaker. You don't have to have somebody hire you at Pixar to be an animator. You don't have to. You don't need that. Just you know, whatever that desire is in your heart, and I strongly believe those are given to us and sort of we've woven into our DNA. Whatever that desire is, do it. Do that thing. And if you do that thing and you love doing that thing, you'll do well doing it. and people will see it, and I think success will follow. I don't think there's any, you know, it's a lot. Sometimes it's a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of hours. I've heard people say that you have to put in 10,000 hours to be proficient at anything. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you've just downloaded your first trial version of Maya, you know, you can start animating. You can be an animator, but you might not be very good at it for a while. You know, it's going to take hours and hours and hours and hours and days and weeks and months and years and even decades to get good, really good at doing something like that.
Well, just to intro this video, so among the many works, you've done Walking with Dinosaurs, you've done all kinds of stuff since then.
Arthur Christmas.
Arthur Christmas, right?
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
But then also through different connections, you found out about Cru, and we're the campus ministry of Cru, the college group on campus, but they do a lot of other things, including something called the Jesus Film,
Yes.
Which has been shown in every country in the world in over 1,200 languages. And they approached you about doing an animated, a Japanese animation film from that, using some of the...
Well, I really lobbied them in some ways. My good friend Irv Placius is here, and he produced this film, really. I think he's the producer of it. He might say other people helped, but I met Irv, and I met a guy named Jim Green, who was the president of the Jesus Film for many years, shortly after Disney closed its doors here, and I said, you know, I love doing that Tempter's Voice, that film about the life of Jesus, because I am sort of a fanboy of Jesus. I really am, because I think he's sort of a super rebel character and a super cool guy that was, you know, sort of bigger than just being a person. So it's sort of like, you know, I'm fascinated with him as a person even, or just as a, I mean, dare I say, but even as a character in the stories, and the stories he was involved in, the stories he told, and everything else, it just fascinates me to no end. And of course, more songs have probably been written about him than anybody, more symphonies, more movies have probably been made based on biblical stuff than anything else, more books have probably been written and everything else. And so it's like, as an artist, it's like, I like exploring the subject matter of of Jesus Christ and sort of what his life might have been like and things like that. So I'm always looking for ways to maybe, as a filmmaker, to say, well, you know, when I read this, here's what I see in this story, and how can I get that out? And so it's like maybe not putting your artistic twist on it, but trying to show a story that people aren't going to just open up a book and read to see it. So, do you want me to tell you a little bit about this project and how it came about?
Sure.
I don't know what time, if we're running out of
Just a
time
minute
or
or
whatever,
two.
but so after Disney, I met a few people who worked at, which is now called Crew, and the Jesus Film Project, which is still part of Crew. And I said, you know what would be really cool? I said, because if you made an anime film about the life of Jesus, and you know, or even start with a manga and just do like some really cool artwork, and then maybe make a film. And I said, what you could do is you could use, because they have already translated this Jesus film, which is an old movie, it's made 35 years ago or something like that. But it's a pretty good film about the life of Jesus. But they've translated this movie into over 1,000 languages, correct?
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, if you could use the dialogue from that, re-edit it, you know, make it, you know, repaste it, and of course re-storyboard it and re-envision the whole thing, but use lines from that film, then it can be translated immediately into thousands of languages. So the film you're about to see, it's a short animated film. It's like 8 minutes.
9, I think. Yeah.
So yeah, it's not that short. We have a version that we just cut together a year or so ago. It's about a 4-minute version of the same story, but this is the full 8-minute version. But I wanted this film to be an anime film, and I didn't want it to be an American director aping anime or trying to do something that looked like Japanese anime. I said, this has to be a Japanese film. I said, it's got to be a Japanese film about Jesus. Well, you know, a lot of people, if you're from Japan or if you've lived in that culture or if you visited there, you know that Christianity is not a big seller in Japan. It's just not. Maybe 2% of the entire population are Christians, which is understandable. But so they would never, you know, naturally they wouldn't sort of gravitate toward the subject matter. So through various connections and producers, we, Crew, engaged a studio called Studio 4C in Tokyo. They're a great anime studio, fantastic artists. And we had storyboarded it here, and we had sort of cut it together, and Herb had a lot to do with editing it and producing the work that was done on it. And I was in England at the time working for Aardman on Arthur Christmas, and I would just work on it at night, you know, when I was finished with work, and just sort of volunteered my time because it was a story I really wanted to tell. What I wanted to tell was the crucifixion from the point of view of one of the men hanging on the cross next to Jesus. So it wasn't Jesus' point of view through this story. It was one of these other guys that was executed with him on the same day. And, you know, no matter what you believe about Jesus, it is very historically factual that he and 2 other guys were executed by the Romans on a certain day in history. And so this tells the story of the guy, one of the guys who was, one of the thieves who was executed with him. And it just starts off with, in the morning, with the guy's cell. He's being, you know, in the Roman prison where he's being held. So,
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. Thanks. Yeah, well, go ahead and roll it.
I want to watch this. I haven't seen it in a while.
Tell us, is it against our law for us to pay taxes to the Roman Emperor or not?
Show me a silver coin.
Jesus, speak to us.
Whose face and name are these on it?
Caesar!
Then give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.
Crucify him!
Yes, crucify him!
Get back! Back! Get back! You! Get away! Make room! Get out! You! Out of the way!
Why do you torment him so?
Leave him! He is the Messiah!
He has done nothing wrong!
Cut the ropes!
You! Carry it! Go on, move! Move! This is no ordinary mystic's garment.
Here, let go! No, don't tear it! I tell you what! Let's play for this!
Get on with it!
Forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they're doing. Show us one of your miracles. Save yourself if you are the king of the Jews.
He has saved others. Let him save himself.
Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us.
Don't you fear God?
We received the same sentence he did, but he has done no wrong. Remember me, Jesus. When you come as king,
I promise you. Today you will be in paradise. With me. Into your hands I commit my spirit. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, even though he dies, he will live.
So yeah, it's a pretty heavy film, obviously.
Well, we want to make the I call it the sister film to this, which is the film story of Mary Magdalene, who was a very close friend of Jesus and a disciple of his that witnessed his resurrection, which we celebrate as Easter now, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But that's this. I mean, we're sort of in the process of starting to work on a few other. I'm working with them to do a few other
about
films.
5 different films.
Yeah, there's 5 new short films, and there's one that's going to be sort of the sister companion piece to this, which is not at all violent, but it follows the story to the next day and sees it through her point of view of what she saw. And
So this was originally going to be a feature film all the way through, and now you decided to...
well, I sort of wanted to do a feature film, but this was sort of like for Crew, it was, and for the Jesus Film Project, it was a way to almost a proof of concept film, to do something short to start with. And after we did it, was like maybe even shorter. So we've edited, like I mentioned, a 4-minute version of this. So there's there's a version. You can see it downloaded.
Yeah, you can have it on their phone. You can bring it up in any language. And
yeah, I think it's all, how many languages is it in now, this film?
130.
130, which means probably it's the most translated short animated film in history. Because even Disney does, maybe 35 languages.
The Lion King has 20 or something like that.
Yeah. So, but this was originally, you see the lip sync was sort of bad in the English, but it was originally animated to the Japanese soundtrack. So this is truly a Japanese anime film done by Japanese artists in Japan. I just sort of helped get it started and get it over there, and gave some early direction of how to make, I guess I sort of pre-visualized the story and worked with a storyboard artist to storyboard it. But then they took it from there and they did it. So it was just great to see it.
Well, in just a minute, I want to transition to kind of like you guys are processing that a little bit on your own if you want. Like we've got some questions and some small group things you guys can do. But I want to offer a chance for any other questions here, maybe 1 or 2 more questions for Barry over any other things that you've seen so far, including that, maybe the process, or I see here in the back.
Yeah, how long did it take the Japanese studio to produce it, and what's been the
It seems like they did it in about, was it like 3 months time, Irv?
About 6.
6, oh. Yeah, it was, 6 months time.
And what was your second question? The impact, you said?
I'm not sure how the impact is, but there's probably people here who know. I mean, I hear stories all the time, sort of, here and there, people that have seen it, that have had, but it's. I don't know if it's had a great effect in Tokyo or in Japan, as much as maybe other places that it's been dubbed into other languages. But,
Yeah, well, it has been used all over the world, particularly in Africa. It's being used a lot. And then the booklet that you see there, the manga comic, that is our Japan campus ministry team put that together. Just walking through what does it mean to make that decision for Jesus, and what is that all about? But often in conjunction with things like this. So that's kind of neat. Any other questions?
I did have a question. I was just confused. I mean, like in Japan, obviously it's about 2% of Christianity. So most people are probably ignorant and kind of oblivious to this character Jesus, like no emotional ties. It's a little bit different than Americans because we know what Jesus did. I guess there's this whole beginning story, from this miracle to and I grew up in a Catholic family. I don't know. I just critiquing the whole short. I just felt like it's going to be hard for Japanese people to get that emotional tie, to feel that striking,
Because you don't know who Jesus was.
You don't know who he is.
It's an 8-minute short given that, but I mean, I don't know. I always thought that that emotional ties with what lured the Japanese.
Like the rest of his life helped to see who he is.
The morals, and then also the teachings of Jesus and all that stuff.
Right.
So so I guess if I could turn that into a question, why choose this section in particular?
Exactly.
For a short, and the thief story, I guess.
Yeah, the thief story is one I was interested in, but the first film that the Jesus film wanted to make, they did anime, was on the crucifixion. So this was my, sort of the way I thought you could look at it. So it really wasn't Jesus' story, it was the guy that was with him. It was his story, it was his emotional story, and his story of being a thief and thinking back on the crime he had committed, and it really wasn't Jesus' story. It was his story. So that's really what we tried to do here. For Westerners, I think you see Jesus as the main character, but he's not the main character of the film. He's a secondary character, really. So the main character is the thief. What's interesting, I thought was always an interesting connection. I don't know if many, but Japan was the last culture to use crucifixion as a means of execution in the world, and so I don't know if they, how that connection made, but I don't know if that had any connection or would have, but who knows? I just make them. After that, I don't. It's like other people do things.
You're on to your next project.
Well, I do. I get very interested in the next thing coming up. So,
do you want to give us one glimpse or thought about what some of your next projects are, or what one of them is?
Well, most of these things I can't. My very next project is a short film that I'm shooting one day next week. We're shooting in Orlando at a stage in Orlando, but it's a story that I wrote. It's not a biblical story. It's not anything like that. It's just it's a surreal comedy. It's about a college student. It's about a college student who has a very strange reaction to a peanut allergy, and a very bizarre thing happens to him. So anyway, it's a sort of a dark comedy or surreal comedy. But yeah, so that's the film I'm sort of concentrating on right now, and then I'm doing some putting together some artwork and packages for some other film projects. 4 different producers, and one is in Germany, one is in Tokyo, and one is in Los Angeles.
Well, you've clearly got a lot going on and very busy, and I really appreciate that, for you taking the time to meet with us. And I would like just to give him a thank you, round of applause for what he did.